Hey guys, tonight we wake up not in your own cozy bed, but flat on your back under a canvas tent, pressed shoulder to shoulder with 7 other sweaty strangers who snore like broken trumpets. You blink against the gray dawn and the first thing you hear is an actual trumpet, blasting the Roman equivalent of an alarm clock. It's loud, brassy, and about as subtle as a legionary payroll clerk. You groan, but trust me, you'd better move, because the centurion doesn't care if you're groggy. This isn't summer camp. This is the Roman army, and here's the bad news: you probably wouldn't last a single day, so, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and your local time in the comments. I want to know where in the world you're listening to this right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The trumpet hasn't even finished echoing and already your tent mates are rolling off straw pallets, pulling on tunics, strapping on sandals with more laces than a modern sneakerhead would tolerate. The air is damp with sweat, leather, and last night's barley porridge burps. You stretch, joints complaining, and duck through the flap into the raw morning chill. All around you, the camp comes alive, smoke from cooking fires. The rattle of shields, the grumble of men who know today will hurt. Mainstream fact: a Roman legionary's day started at dawn, often with drill or a march. Legions lived by discipline, not sleep. Historians still argue whether the schedule was harsher in peacetime garrisons than in wartime campaigns, but either way, easy morning wasn't in the vocabulary. Your stomach growls. The food from last night, pulse, a barley mush, was barely enough to feed a mouse. You'd kill for bread and cheese, maybe even a lukewarm latte, but instead you chew a hard biscuit that tastes like ancient disappointment. Joke 1, congratulations, you've just had the first Roman energy bar. Before you can complain, a centurion stomps past. His vine staff, a thick stick cut from a grapevine, taps against his palm like a metronome of dread. He's already scanning for slackers, and you definitely look like one. You snap to attention, clutching the only thing issued so far, your dignity, which is shrinking fast. The camp itself is overwhelming. Perfect rows of tents. Stakes hammered in military precision, ditches dug for defense. You realize Rome doesn't just march, it replicates order everywhere it goes. Quirky tidbit: even temporary camps were laid out with the same logic as permanent forts, down to the straight streets, designated latrines, and central headquarters. A legion could set up a mini-city in a matter of hours, and you, poor recruit, are just one pawn in this sprawling machine. As the trumpets signal again, men gather into formations, shields slung over backs, eyes forward. You shuffle into line, trying to match the rhythm, but your sandals slip in the mud. Someone elbows you. Someone else laughs. Welcome to your first day in the Legion. Where humiliation is breakfast and blisters are lunch, joke 2 drifts through your mind as you stumble. Maybe if I limp hard enough, they'll invent medical discharge early. Spoiler, they won't. The centurion barks orders. You don't understand half the Latin, but tone is universal: move faster, hold straighter, stop looking like you were raised by goats. The veterans beside you look carved from stone, scars tracing maps across their arms, their eyes weary but unflinching. You realize they've done this routine for years, maybe decades. The contrast between their poise and your awkward shuffle couldn't be clearer. Historians still argue whether recruits were eased in with lighter duties or immediately hammered with full training. Judging by the way your lungs are already on fire, you're convinced it's the latter. And it's not even mid-morning yet, the trumpet sounds a third time. Breakfast is over, grumbling is over, excuses are over. The Legion is moving, and if you don't keep pace, you'll be tasting the centurion's vine staff before you taste anything else today. You grip your tunic, swallow the last of that sad biscuit, and try to convince your body that it's ready for whatever Rome thinks warm-up means. Joke 3, muttered to yourself: I joined for the travel opportunities, should have read the fine print. And just like that, your first dawn in the Legion has ended. The sun is climbing, the drill field waits, and you haven't even touched a sword yet. You shuffle with the others toward the open parade ground, the Centurion's vine staff clicking like a metronome of menace. Today is the day you formally sign away your old life. No matter where you came from, farmer, runaway, or unlucky volunteer, you're about to become a cog in the Roman war machine. And the first cog in that machine is the oath, the sacramentum. The men gather in ranks, the air thick with leather and dust. A senior officer stands before you, his cloak crimson in the early sun. He raises his hand, voice booming words you half understand but fully feel: loyalty to the emperor, obedience to commands, willingness to endure to the death. Mainstream fact: every legionary swore the sacramentum to obey orders unconditionally. Binding soldier to state with terrifying seriousness. Historians still argue whether the oath was seen more as a legal contract, a sacred vow to the gods, or both, but either way, breaking it could mean execution. You repeat the words, stumbling through Latin syllables, trying not to look like you just pledged eternal service to the world's most terrifying HR department. When it's over, the Centurion stamps the vine staff in the dirt. You're in. No refund policy. Joke 1, congrats, you just agreed to 25 years of mandatory cardio with a side of stabbing. The paperwork, well, its Roman equivalent, comes next. A clerk with ink-stained fingers scratches your name, or at least something close to it, into wax tablets. If you weren't a citizen before, good news, enlistment might eventually grant you that prize after discharge. Quirky tidbit: for non-citizens, service in auxiliary units promised citizenship for them and sometimes their families, a dangling carrot to keep loyalty sharp. You look around at your new brothers in arms. Some grin proudly, already fantasizing about land grants or pensions after retirement. Others just stare, grim and quiet, knowing those rewards are decades away, if they live that long. A murmur rises in the ranks, talk of campaigns in distant provinces. Britain, Dacia, maybe even Parthia. The names sound exotic and terrifying, like destinations in a travel brochure written by someone who hates you. The Centurion interrupts daydreams with a barked command. He lectures on the price of desertion, flogging, branding, sometimes execution. He taps his vine staff meaningfully on his palm. You swallow hard. Historians still argue whether desertion was rampant or relatively rare, but judging by the severity of punishments, Rome clearly feared soldiers running more than enemy arrows. The ceremony closes with sacrifices. A goat bleats, a priest chants, and the smell of blood mixes with incense. The gods are now your supervisors, too. You bow your head, pretending piety, but mostly thinking about how itchy your tunic is. Joke 2 flickers: if Mars is listening, I'd like fewer blisters, please. By the time the rituals finish, the sun is higher, and the parade ground is buzzing with activity. Veterans drill in perfect formation, their shields glinting, their movements mechanical. New recruits like you stand awkwardly, still digesting the fact that your future is no longer yours. The officer dismisses you with a wave. You shuffle back toward the armory, where the quartermasters grin like mischievous uncles. They know what comes next, and so do the veterans smirking at you. The oath may have bound your soul, but the equipment you're about to receive will crush your body. Joke 3, muttered as you trail into line: sign my life away this morning, guess the afternoon will just finish the job. You shuffle into the armory, the place where dreams of heroic glory go to die under the weight of iron and leather. Quartermasters bark your name, or something close enough, and shove gear into your arms like overzealous gift givers at the world's most exhausting birthday party. By the end, you're a walking arsenal with the posture of a wilted reed. First, the scutum, a massive curved shield taller than your torso, layered wood-faced with leather, rimmed with iron. Mainstream fact: the scutum gave Rome its edge. Literally, it overlapped with the man beside you, turning lines of individuals into a wall. Historians still argue whether its curved shape was better for offense or just easier to craft. But one thing's certain, carrying it all day makes your shoulder whimper. You test the weight and nearly topple backward. Next comes the gladius, a short sword not for flashy duels but for stabbing straight through the chaos. It looks unimpressive compared to the long barbarian blades you've heard about, but veterans wink knowingly. This stubby knife built an empire. The quartermaster slides it into a scabbard at your side. You already imagine stabbing yourself in the thigh by accident. Joke 1, at least I'll die in regulation uniform. Then the pilum, a throwing spear with a heavy iron shank. Quirky tidbit, the iron tip was designed to bend on impact, so enemies couldn't throw it back. Clever for strategy, brutal for your poor shoulders. You sling 2 over your pack, wondering how any human spine survives this daily, and speaking of the pack, the dreaded sarcina. A wooden pole slung over the shoulder carries your entire life: cloak, cooking pot, rations, spare sandals, stakes for tents, even a saw. Each bundle weighs around 30 kilograms, enough to make modern hikers cry into their trail mix. Veterans called legionaries Marius mules after the general who standardized these loads. Joke 2, congratulations, you've been promoted from human to donkey. Armor comes last, lorica hamada, a shirt of chain mail, cold and clanking, or if you're unlucky, lorica segmentata, strips of iron strapped around your torso like you're cosplaying as a tin can. Historians still argue which armor type was more common across provinces, but they all agree neither was light. Add a helmet that smells like every sweaty head before yours, and you're officially a walking oven. You stagger out of the armory with the rest, every man clanking, grunting, wobbling. The centurion eyes you, vine staff ready. Stand tall. He barks. You attempt to straighten, but your knees buckle under the combined weight of Rome's greatness. A veteran chuckles. Don't worry, he says. After a year, you won't even feel it. You glare, unconvinced. The quartermasters aren't done. They shove a spade and a wicker basket into your hands, because when you're not fighting, you're digging. Mainstream fact, each soldier carried tools for fortifications. Rome's legions were as much engineers as fighters, building roads, bridges, and camps wherever they marched. That shovel will see more action than your sword. You shuffle into formation for inspection, your kit jangling like a kitchen falling downstairs. The centurion strides by, smacking shields, tugging straps, shouting at anyone who looks half dead, which is all of you. He pauses at you, frowns at your crooked scabbard, and whacks your helmet with his staff. Stars explode behind your eyes. Welcome to standard issue correction. Joke 3 trickles in as you struggle not to topple over. Rome conquered the world by weaponizing back pain. The sun climbs higher, sweat pools under your armor, and you realize the oath was the easy part. This iron burden will be your new skin, your new house, your new prison. And the worst news? You haven't even started training yet. You stumble out to the drill field, armor clanking, shield biting into your forearm, and that cursed sarcina digging into your shoulder like a personal vendetta. The centurion's whistle shrieks, and suddenly you're sprinting, stopping, turning, all while trying not to collapse. Welcome to Roman training, where exhaustion is the appetizer, and humiliation is the main course. The weapons master hands you not a sharp gladius but a wooden sword. It looks like a toy until you lift it and feel your arms start screaming. Mainstream fact, Roman recruits trained with wooden swords and shields deliberately heavier than the real thing, the idea being that if you survived practice, battle would feel merciful. Historians still argue whether this training method was Rome's secret sauce or just a particularly cruel way of thinning out the weak early. You square off against a post in the sandpit, a sturdy log buried upright. You slash, stab, and block while the centurion paces, yelling corrections. Your thrusts wobble, your shield droops, and the vine staff cracks across your calf before you can even yelp. Again. He roars. You stab again, lungs on fire. Quirky tidbit, that wooden post was called a poly, and veterans swore by it. Some even claimed they could tell a recruit's future survival by how quickly he learned to strike the wood without breaking rhythm. Hours crawl by. Sweat soaks your tunic. Sand sticks to your face. Veterans demonstrate perfect footwork, shifting in and out of formation like dancers who've been practicing for decades. You try to mimic them, but mostly you just look like you're tripping over invisible cats. Joke 1 drifts up. Somewhere out there is a log that can honestly say it beat me in a fight. The drill shifts to shield work. You lock your scutum with the man beside you, forming a wall. The centurion bellows, and suddenly rocks are flying, other soldiers hurling stones at your formation to test your grip. You crouch, press forward, and realize the scutum isn't just protection, it's a prison cell you carry around, and your only hope is that the man beside you doesn't flinch. Next comes marching drills. You line up, shield slung, sarcina strapped, pila balanced, and tramp around the field in endless circles. Step left, step right, pivot, advance. The centurion shouts cadence, and you try to keep rhythm, but your sandals slip, and suddenly you're a domino knocking 3 men sideways. The vine staff cracks across your helmet. Joke 2, muffled by ringing ears, pretty sure I just invented synchronized falling. The training doesn't end. You practice hurling the pilum, watching it arc and sink into straw targets. The iron shank bends just as promised, sticking uselessly, proof the enemy won't be throwing it back. Your arm aches like it's about to detach, but you keep throwing because stopping isn't allowed. Mainstream fact again, Roman drills were relentless. They didn't just prepare you for combat, they conditioned your body to obey commands without thought. Some ancient writers compared it to forging metal: heat, hammer, repeat until the shape holds. Historians still argue whether recruits trained daily at full intensity or rotated between drill, labor, and guard duty, but every source agrees, the regimen was brutal. Finally, you're ordered into mock combat. Wooden sword in hand, shield up, you square off against another recruit who looks as terrified as you feel. The centurion barks for blood, not real, but close enough. You swing, he blocks, you thrust, he stumbles, then his shield smashes your nose so hard you see Mars himself applauding. Both of you collapse in the sand while the veterans laugh, the whistle blows. Training halts. You're drenched, bruised, and wondering how you'll ever lift your arms again. Veterans clap each other on the shoulders, grinning like men who've forgotten pain. You just lie there, tasting sand, wishing for the sweet mercy of a feint. Joke 3 hobbles into your mind. Honestly, the log was a kinder opponent. And as you stagger back to camp, every muscle screaming, you realize this was just one morning. Tomorrow, it happens again. And again. For 25 years. You drag yourself back into line after the drill, every limb throbbing, convinced that surely this must be the worst of it. But no, the centurion hasn't even played his trump card yet: discipline. If training was designed to break your muscles, discipline is designed to break your spirit until it snaps neatly into formation. The centurion paces in front of the ranks, vine staff resting on his shoulder. His eyes dart like a hawk, hunting weakness. A man nearby fumbles with his strap, and crack, the staff lashes across his back before he can even look up. Mainstream fact: Roman soldiers lived under one of the strictest codes in the ancient world. Fines, extra duties, flogging, and death penalties were routine tools to keep order. Historians still argue whether the harshest punishments were common or more theatrical deterrents, but one truth is clear: fear welded the legions together. You watch as another recruit, late returning from latrine duty, is hauled forward. His punishment? Standing all day outside the camp, armor on, shield raised, while the rest of you eat. The veterans barely glance at him. They've seen worse. Quirky tidbit: for severe mistakes, men could be forced to sleep outside the camp's protective walls, stripped of rations, or even be made to eat barley instead of wheat, a punishment so dreaded it earned its own reputation. Barley was for animals, and being reduced to it meant you were halfway out of the brotherhood. Then comes the whispered specter, decimatio. The centurion describes it almost casually, like mentioning the weather. If a unit mutinies or disgraces itself, the men are lined up, lots are drawn, and every 10th man is clubbed or stoned to death by his comrades. Joke 1 flickers darkly through your head, so basically team building, but with fewer trust falls and more funerals. The threat is enough to make your stomach churn. And yet, looking around, you realize no one dares speak against it. The logic is brutal but effective. Collective responsibility binds tighter than camaraderie ever could. You're not just responsible for your own mistakes, but for keeping the man beside you in line, too. Punishments aren't always deadly, though. Sometimes they're designed to humiliate. A man caught stealing is paraded through camp with his loot hung mockingly around his neck. A soldier who fell asleep on guard duty is flogged in front of the cohort. And if the centurion is in a creative mood, you might find yourself digging ditches twice as wide as anyone else's. Joke 2 sneaks out under your breath. If laziness was the crime, I'd be executed by lunchtime. Mainstream fact again, centurions carried vine staffs not as decoration but as everyday tools of correction. Ancient sources describe them using it freely, striking soldiers to enforce obedience. Historians still argue whether centurions were universally hated tyrants or respected father figures who balanced cruelty with loyalty. The truth probably depended on whether you were on the receiving end of the stick. You glance at the veterans, expecting resentment, but instead you see calm acceptance. To them, discipline is survival. They know that on the battlefield, hesitation kills, and obedience saves. The punishments may be brutal, but they're the glue that keeps formations from crumbling when arrows darken the sky. Still, as you shoulder your aching gear, you can't help but think discipline feels like being ruled by equal parts teacher, jailer, and angry parent. And the centurion, ever watchful, seems to sense your thought. He taps his staff against your shin, not hard enough to bruise, but just enough to remind you who holds the leash. Joke 3 limps into your head as you wince. Forget enemies. If the staff doesn't kill me first, the marches surely will. And right on cue, the trumpet sounds. The day's punishment isn't over. It's about to walk 20 miles beside you. The trumpet blares again, sharper this time, and the order ripples through the camp, march. You groan under your breath, but there's no pause to stretch, no polite warm-up jog. You hoist the sarcina onto your shoulder, balance the shield against your back, and join the column as it snakes out of camp like an ironclad centipede. The pace is merciless from the first step. Mainstream fact, Roman legions were infamous for their long marches. 20 miles in about 5 hours was expected, often carrying loads up to 30 kilograms. Historians still argue whether this pace was sustainable every day or mainly reserved for campaign emergencies, but every source agrees, the distances broke men as surely as battle did. The road stretches ahead in neat, paved perfection, one of Rome's superpowers. Stones fitted so tight you could balance a coin between them. You'd think a smooth road would be a blessing, but under your aching feet it feels like an endless treadmill of doom. Joke 1 muttered to the man beside you, "At least if I collapse, the engineering will make it easy to drag me home." The centurion's bark cadence, keeping every sandal in rhythm. Shields clatter, spears sway, dust rises until your throat feels like it's stuffed with flour. You pass farms, villages, streams, but there's no sightseeing on this tour, just forward, always forward. And if you fall out of line, the vine staff waits. Or worse, your brothers glare, knowing your weakness drags them down too. Midday, the sun beats like a hammer. Sweat runs under your armor, and your cloak sticks like a wet dog. You dream of water, but the next stream isn't for drinking, it's for crossing. Out come the tools, axes, saws, wicker baskets. You're ordered to cut trees, lash together a makeshift bridge, and haul wagons across. Mainstream fact again, legionaries doubled as engineers, trained to build bridges, roads, even siege works at speed. Quirky tidbit, Julius Caesar once bragged his men built a full bridge across the Rhine in just 10 days. Historians still argue whether that feat was possible exactly as described or whether Caesar massaged the timeline for dramatic flair. You barely finish the bridge work before the whistle shrills again, pack up, move on. Shoulders burning, feet raw, you march another stretch. Jokes fly through the ranks, dark, tired humor is the only energy left. One veteran points at your wobbling gait and says, "Don't worry, tomorrow your blisters will have blisters." Joke 2, excellent, finally something in this army reproduces faster than lice. As evening falls, your heart leaps when the trumpet signals halt. But rest isn't on the menu. You've reached tonight's campsite, which means it's time for everyone's favorite activity, digging ditches. Out come the shovels, pickaxes, baskets. Every man has a quota, and if you thought 20 miles was bad, try shifting dirt with trembling arms after. Mainstream fact, Roman armies built fortified camps every single night, even on forced marches. Ditches, ramparts, palisades, the whole grid. It wasn't just paranoia, it was discipline carved into the earth. Historians still argue whether this practice slowed campaigns or saved them, but considering how long the empire lasted, the smart money is on saved. You stab your spade into the ground, dirt clinging like it knows you're weak. Around you, men grunt, curse, sing to keep rhythm. The ditch grows inch by inch until it's deep enough to trip anyone foolish enough to attack. Stakes are driven in, ramparts heaped high. By the time the work ends, the stars are out and your body feels like it belongs to someone else. Joke 3 staggers out as you drop onto your pallet, 20 miles walked, a moat dug, and not a single step closer to retirement. You fall asleep still wearing your armor, too tired to care. And tomorrow, the trumpet will blast again. The sun dips, shadows stretch, and you think, foolishly, that the march and the ditch digging must be the end of it. But no. The centurion's whistle shrills, and the entire column of weary men turns back to work. Tonight you're building a city out of nothing, because Rome doesn't camp in chaos. It camps like an empire, the Metators, special scouts, stride ahead to mark the grid with stakes and cords. Within minutes, order begins to bloom where only scrub and dirt existed. Mainstream fact, every Roman camp, whether for a single night or months, followed a precise rectangular plan, with streets, gates, ditches, ramparts, and a central headquarters. Historians still argue whether this nightly labor slowed armies or actually sped them up by preventing ambushes and boosting morale. But the end result was always the same. Rome carried its city wherever it marched. You're assigned to dig more ditches, hauling dirt in wicker baskets until your shoulders beg for mercy. Others drive sharpened stakes into ramparts, weaving a fence that turns the camp into a fortress. Fires spark in neat rows, smiths hammer out repairs, and suddenly this patch of nowhere looks like it's been here for years. Quirky tidbit, archaeologists have found remnants of these camps across Europe, so standardized that you could drop a map of one onto another and the streets would nearly align. The centurion prowls through the work, vine staff in hand, reminding you that the gods invented geometry just to make you sweat. He orders tents pitched in perfect rows, 8 men to a leather shelter, each assigned to a contubernian, your new family whether you like their snoring or not. You hammer stakes, trip on ropes, and curse under your breath. Joke 1, at this point, I'd happily sleep in the ditch I dug. Once the defenses are up, the gates are placed, 4 of them, each aligned with the cardinal directions. Standards are raised, signaling which unit occupies which block. The command tent glows in the center, flanked by supply depots and animal pens. Order so exact it makes your aching body dizzy. You glance around and realize, if you squint, it looks like a miniature Rome. Food fires flare. The smell of boiling grain mixes with smoke, sweat, and horse dung. You chew on a crust of bread, staring into the flames, barely able to lift your spoon. Around you, comrades banter, veterans swap lies about campaigns in Dacia, Spain, Britannia. They laugh like men who have made peace with exhaustion. You try to join in, but every muscle feels like it's plotting mutiny. Then come the watch rotations. The centurion announces who stands guard when, and you're unlucky enough to draw second watch. That means stumbling out of your tent in the middle of the night, eyes gritty, to pace the rampart with a spear in hand. Mainstream fact: guard duty was sacred in Roman camps. Falling asleep at your post could mean death, not just for you, but flogging for your entire group. Historians still argue whether punishments were always carried out so harshly, but the fear was real enough to keep eyelids pried open. You trudge along the wall, stars wheeling above, the night air cool against sweat-stiffened linen. Somewhere in the dark, wolves howl, and your heart races until you remember the ditch and stakes you built. That's the genius of it. The labor exhausts you, but it also comforts you. You know you're safe inside this ordered box. By the time dawn hints at the horizon, the camp hums like a hive. Fires relit, gear packed, trumpets ready. The whole miniature city will vanish in an hour, leaving only ditches and ash to confuse whoever stumbles across it later. Joke 2 sneaks up on you as you shoulder the pack again. If Rome ever collapses, it'll be from exhaustion, not barbarians. You look back once at the perfect geometry, then forward to the endless road. The camp may vanish, but the memory of digging it will ride every bone in your body for weeks. Joke 3 mutters, "Great, we just built the world's most uncomfortable hotel, and checkout is mandatory at sunrise." The sun hasn't even finished climbing when the order comes: breakfast. You'd expect something hearty after 20 miles and a night of ditch digging, but no, the Legionnaire's feast is as plain as the discipline that cooked it. You huddle with your contubernium, grinding grain with a hand mill until your arms scream all over again. The result? A gray mush called pulse, barley porridge that tastes like defeat with a dash of smoke. Mainstream fact: pulse was the staple food of Roman soldiers, made from barley or wheat boiled into a paste. It was cheap, filling, and easy to carry. Meat was rare, often reserved for special occasions. Historians still argue whether the monotony of diet kept soldiers lean and strong or slowly wore down their health. But either way, no one joined the legion for the cuisine. You choked down spoonfuls, imagining instead a fresh loaf, olives, cheese, maybe honey if the gods were generous. Instead, you gnaw on a strip of bacon so salty it puckers your lips. Quirky tidbit: the army actually prized bacon because it kept well on long campaigns. In fact, whole shipments of salted pork moved along Roman roads like edible supply lines. You grimace, chewing, and joke 1 slips out. Nothing says empire like chewing leather with seasoning. To wash it down, there's no wine, no ale, just pasca. A mix of sour wine vinegar and water, sometimes with herbs tossed in for flair. At first sip, you gag. By the third, you admit grudgingly it's not awful. It quenches thirst, masks bad water, and supposedly sharpens the spirit. Mainstream fact again: pasca was the true drink of soldiers, while fine wine was reserved for officers. Even Julius Caesar reportedly drank it on campaign. Historians still argue whether its acidity really had medicinal properties or if soldiers just convinced themselves while choking it down. You lick the last of the porridge from your wooden bowl, stomach heavy but unsatisfied. Around you, men belch and scrape spoons, used to the taste, maybe even fond of it. A veteran leans over and says, "Eat it quick, before it remembers its grain." You laugh weakly, wishing for figs. Joke 2, "One more bowl of this and I'll start mooing." After breakfast, it's chores again. Each man cleans his cooking pot, oils his armor, checks sandals for wear. Leather laces snap with frustrating regularity, and you discover that carrying spares is as important as carrying courage. You smear olive oil on your mail, turning it from rust bait to gleaming shirt of agony. Rations are tallied. Bread, barley, bacon, cheese, vinegar, all measured out with bureaucratic precision. The quartermaster scowls at anyone who dares complain. Quirky tidbit again, soldiers often supplemented their diet by foraging or buying extras from civilian traders who followed the army. Chickens, vegetables, even wine might appear if pay arrived on time. You glance wistfully at a trader's cart just outside the palisade, but your purse is emptier than your stomach. By mid-morning, your belly sloshes with porridge, vinegar water, and regret. You march out for drill again, shield thudding your side with every step. Joke 3 mutters through your teeth, if the enemy doesn't kill me, indigestion will. And as the sun climbs higher, you realize Rome didn't conquer the world with feasts. It conquered it with barley, bacon, and the stubborn will to keep walking. The morning drills grind to a halt, and for one brief moment you think you might finally catch a nap in the shade. Instead, the centurion points toward a trench line at the edge of camp. Latrini, he barks. Yes, it's time for the glamorous side of Legion life, sanitation. You trudge over with shovel in hand, and sure enough, the camp latrines are being dug with the same precision as ramparts. Mainstream fact, Roman armies were unusually disciplined about hygiene, setting up designated trenches, flowing water channels, and even sponge sticks for cleaning. Historians still argue whether these practices actually reduced disease or simply reflected Roman obsession with order, but the evidence suggests their strictness gave legions a surprising advantage over less organized foes. You crouch over the trench, trying not to look your comrades in the eye, and mutter joke 1, Rome may fall someday, but at least it will fall with clean ditches. But sanitation doesn't stop there. After latrine duty, you're ordered to pick lice from your tunic seams. Quirky tidbit, Roman soldiers nicknamed lice their comrades, because they marched with you whether you liked it or not. Some burned them in little piles, others just cracked them between thumbnails with satisfying pops. You join the grim ritual, half horrified, half relieved you're not the only one scratching. The camp buzzes with men tending minor ailments, blisters, cuts, toothaches. That's when the Medici, the legion's medical staff, appear. They're not doctors in the modern sense but trained specialists, often with experience from battlefield carnage. They carry scalpels, probes, bandages, and jars of honey, vinegar, and herbs. You gape as one calmly sews up a gash on a soldier's arm, the patient gritting teeth while a comrade holds him steady. Mainstream fact again, Roman medicine in the legions included surprisingly advanced surgical practices like cautery, ligatures, and even primitive antiseptics like wine and honey. You inch closer, fascinated until the medic grabs you. Hold this man down, he orders. Before you can protest, he presses a hot iron against a wound, sealing it with a hiss. The smell is unforgettable, somewhere between burnt pork and nightmares. Joke 2, muttered through your gag reflex, dinner just lost all appeal. The medic works briskly, no nonsense, muttering about Galen's theories as he ties bandages. Historians still argue how much theory actually reached the battlefield. Did soldiers benefit from learned medical texts, or was it mostly trial, error, and strong stomachs? Watching this man stitch flesh with crude tools yet steady hands, you suspect the latter kept more men alive than the libraries did. Nearby, rumors spread of amputations. A veteran swears he saw a man survive after losing a leg in Germania, fitted with a wooden peg. Another insists he heard of soldiers with bronze prosthetic arms. Quirky tidbit, archaeologists have indeed uncovered prosthetic limbs from the Roman world, though whether they were common for soldiers is still debated. You shiver, suddenly more protective of your limbs than ever before. As the afternoon sun bakes the camp, you return to chores, scrubbing gear, changing bandages, airing cloaks to chase off rot. Discipline extends to health. The centurion checks for slackers, because one infection can fell more soldiers than an enemy ambush. Mainstream fact, disease killed far more troops in ancient wars than battle ever did. Rome's rigid routines of sanitation, however unpleasant, were its secret weapon. By evening, your blisters ooze, your belly churns with yesterday's bacon, and your skin crawls with phantom itches. You collapse on your pallet, groaning. Joke 3 slips out as you scratch your scalp. At this point, the lice should just get uniforms and draw pay. The trumpet screams again, sharp enough to slice through your drowsy haze. Men surge to their feet, shields rattling, pila balanced, the air suddenly tense. Today isn't for digging ditches or picking lice. Today, you learn how a battle actually breathes. You line up in the field, scutum strapped to your arm, gladius at your side, pilum clutched tight. The centurion stalks the ranks, vine staff raised, barking orders until the entire cohort moves like a single beast. Mainstream fact, the legion's strength was its formation. The triplex aces, 3 lines deep, allowed Rome to rotate tired soldiers forward and keep pressure constant. Historians still argue whether this exact system was always used in the imperial period or if it evolved into looser formations. But the principle of discipline through depth remained. The signal horn blares. The front rank raises pila. You throw yours high, the heavy shank whistling before burying itself into a straw target. The iron bends exactly as designed, useless to the enemy, but satisfying to watch. You grab your second and hurl it, shoulder screaming from the strain. Then comes the command, draw swords, shields lock, edges overlapping until you can barely see the world. The centurion yells, advance. And suddenly you're marching forward, shoulder to shoulder, shield wall pressing like a moving cliff. Behind you, the second line keeps formation, ready to step in. Ahead, straw dummies stand in for enemies. But your imagination fills them with snarling barbarians. You thrust with the gladius, short jabs aimed low into the dummy's gut. Mainstream fact again, Roman soldiers were trained to stab, not slash. A stab wound killed quicker and exposed less of your body. Quirky tidbit, some ancient sources claim recruits who slashed instead of stabbed were punished for wasting time. You mutter joke 1 as your blade thunks, guess Hollywood's big sword fights wouldn't pass inspection. The drill escalates. Horns blare, signals fly, and suddenly you're wheeling, retreating, then surging forward again. You collide with the man beside you, shields smacking, helmets clanking. It feels like fighting inside a barrel of angry bees. The centurion whacks stragglers with his vine staff, reminding everyone this chaos must look like order from above. Your shield grows heavier with every shove, your arm trembling from the strain. Sweat blinds your eyes, sand clogs your sandals. The line halts, then pushes forward again, and you realize this isn't fighting, it's shoving, grinding, breathing in rhythm with hundreds of men who refuse to break. Suddenly, the veterans demonstrate the testudo, the tortoise. Shields rise overhead, others lock to the front and sides, creating an armored shell. Rocks and spears rain down, bouncing harmlessly off. Inside, it's hot, airless, claustrophobic. Joke 2, whisper to yourself, finally, I know what it feels like to live in a bread oven. The horn signals retreat. You stumble back, lungs heaving, sword arm dead weight. The veterans barely pant, smirking at your misery. One claps your shoulder, you'll get used to it. Or you won't. Comforting, historians still argue whether legionaries truly fought in perfect synchronization or if battle devolved into smaller knots of chaos. Judging from your experience, you suspect the truth lies somewhere between. Start in order. End in exhaustion. By the time the trumpet releases you, your shield arm is numb, your legs quake, and your ears still ring with the horn's blare. You collapse onto the ground, wishing the straw dummy you skewered could at least write home about your bravery. Joke 3 escapes with your last breath of energy. If this is practice, I'd hate to see overtime. The centurion doesn't even glance at you. For him, this is routine. For you, It's a reminder that Rome conquered the world not with glory, but with endless, grinding drills that turned men into walls. You're still rubbing the bruise on your shoulder from the last shield drill when the centurion decides you're ready for the next level of misery, siege practice. Fighting a quick battle in the open field is one thing, but Rome didn't just fight armies, it swallowed cities whole, one stone at a time. You trudge toward a training ground where wooden walls have been built to mimic an enemy fort. Towers loom above you, ladders stacked nearby, and piles of stones ready to be hurled. The veterans grin, they've done this before. You swallow hard, already imagining yourself crushed like a grape under a boulder. Mainstream fact, sieges were central to Roman warfare. With patience and engineering, legions constructed camps, trenches, towers, rams, and catapults, slowly choking a city into surrender. Historians still argue whether Rome won more through brute assault or psychological pressure, but either way, besieged towns rarely lasted long. Your unit is ordered to form a testudo and advance under a storm of projectiles. Rocks rain down, clattering on shields, each impact rattling your bones. Inside the shell it's hot, suffocating, and terrifyingly loud. Sweat runs down your neck, pooling at your collar. You pray silently that none of the practice rocks is accidentally replaced with something nastier. Quirky tidbit, some defenders in real sieges hurled not just stones but pots of scalding pitch, dung, or even beehives. Imagine charging a wall only to be mobbed by angry bees, an ancient tactic that sounds like slapstick until you realize the stingers don't care who you are. Joke 1, muttered as your shield shudders, great, Rome trained me to fight men, not bees. When you reach the wall, the centurion bellows for ladders. You and the others heave them up, planting them against the wooden defenses. One by one, men climb, shields over heads, swords clattering. You try to follow, legs trembling, sweat stinging your eyes. Halfway up, someone above loses their grip, and the ladder wobbles dangerously. You freeze, clinging like a terrified squirrel, while veterans bark at you to keep moving. At the top, you lunge onto the platform, thrust your wooden sword into another dummy, and promptly collapse. Your comrades surge past, forming ranks even atop the wall, a reminder that discipline doesn't stop at ground level. Next comes the ram. Logs bound with iron are hoisted by entire squads, men chanting to keep rhythm. You grab a handle, shoulder screaming, and charge as the centurion shouts. The log slams into the gate with a deafening crack. Again. And again. The sound reverberates through your chest, each strike stealing a little more strength. Joke 2, I joined the army to fight people, not furniture. After that, the engineers unveil the artillery, ballistae and onagers. You watch as massive stones are hurled across the field, smashing into the mock walls with thunderous force. The ground shakes. The centurion reminds you that in real sieges, these engines broke walls and morale alike. Mainstream fact again, Roman engineers perfected torsion-powered weapons, giving their armies devastating ranged options. Historians still argue whether these machines were always decisive or mostly theatrical, but standing near one, you'd swear they were thunder given form. By the time the horn signals the end, you're drenched, bruised, and aching in muscles you didn't know existed. The veterans laugh, wiping sweat, recalling real sieges where practice was replaced by screams, fire, and months of waiting. You stare at the wall you just assaulted and can't imagine surviving a single real attempt. As you limp back to camp, shield dragging, Joke 3 staggers out. Next time I see a walled city, I'm voting we just walk around it. But you know Rome doesn't walk around obstacles. It builds, hammers, and starves them until they crumble. And tomorrow, you'll do it all again. The siege drills leave your body a bundle of bruises, but there's no rest, not when Rome has more jobs than swords. The next morning, you're ordered to muster not with fellow legionaries, but with auxiliaries. Non-citizens, foreigners, specialists, an entire world crammed into Rome's ranks. You line up beside archers from Crete, their bows taller than some recruits. One grins and looses a shaft that hisses into a target with unsettling accuracy. Mainstream fact: auxiliaries made up nearly half of Rome's forces at times, providing cavalry, archers, and slingers, roles the heavy infantry couldn't cover. Historians still argue whether auxiliaries were treated as equals in battle or as expendable pawns. But their importance was undeniable. Nearby, slingers from the Balearic Islands whirl lead bullets faster than your eyes can follow. Quirky tidbit: ancient writers claimed these slingers trained from childhood by being forced to hit their breakfast bread with stones before eating. Miss, and no meal. You watch them crack targets with a sound like snapping bones and mutter joke 1, remind me never to steal their lunch. Then the cavalry thunders past, Germanic horsemen clad in mail, spears glittering. You can barely stay upright on your own 2 feet, these men fight from galloping beasts as if born in the saddle. Dust coats your throat, and you marvel at how the legion would crumble without them scouting. Flanking, and chasing down retreating foes, next come the engineers. While you're still sweating from yesterday's ram practice, they're sketching bridges and siege towers, casually discussing pulley systems as if they're planning a children's treehouse. Mainstream fact again: Roman engineers were unmatched, building not just camps and roads but aqueducts, fortresses, and machines that terrified defenders into surrender. Historians still argue whether the engineers were considered soldiers or craftsmen attached to the army, but their skill often mattered more than brute strength. You're handed a shovel, again, and put to work alongside muleteers, hauling supplies from wagons. Barrels of grain, bundles of firewood, amphorae of vinegar. It dawns on you that Rome runs on logistics more than swords. Joke 2, groaned as you stumble under a sack of grain: somewhere out there is a battle won entirely by donkeys. The auxiliaries chatter in a dozen accents. Syrians joke about desert heat, Thracians brag about curved swords, Gauls laugh at your clumsy attempts to balance your scutum. You realize this isn't just Rome's army, it's the empire itself. Stitched together in one marching organism. Quirky tidbit again: some auxiliary units kept their native styles, like camel cavalry from the east. Imagine facing an army while camels screeched across the field. Terrifying and absurd in equal measure. You try not to picture yourself fighting from one. Joke 3 slips out anyway: I'd fall off the camel before the enemy even drew a sword. By sunset, you've shoveled, hauled, stacked, and sweated more than you ever did in drills. Your respect for auxiliaries doubles. They don't just support the legions, they make survival possible. And you realize, grimly, that Rome's greatest weapon isn't the gladius. It's manpower multiplied by diversity. You limp back into camp thinking maybe tonight you'll finally rest. Instead, a clerk with ink-stained fingers calls names for pay. Coins clink onto wooden tables, the sound like thunder rolling across hungry men. This is stipend day, the one moment where even the toughest veterans look like children at a festival. Mainstream fact: Roman soldiers were paid a stipendium, deducted for food, gear, and clothing, with the remainder jingling in their purses. Historians still argue whether the pay was generous enough to inspire loyalty or deliberately low to keep soldiers dependent on donatives, bonus gifts from emperors. Either way, money was always a weapon as sharp as the gladius. You step up, receive a small handful of silver, and immediately feel cheated. The quartermaster rattles off deductions: grain, bacon, repairs, even the vinegar water you choked down. You're left with barely enough to buy a figure. Joke 1, turns out the real enemy wasn't the barbarians, it was accounting. Around you, soldiers gamble. Dice clatter, coins slide, curses fly. One man carves graffiti on his shield, another scrawls rude pictures on the latrine wall. Quirky tidbit: archaeologists have found soldiers' graffiti all over forts, messages ranging from love notes to insults about commanders. You scratch your initials into a post, half proud, half hoping future historians will know you existed. The veterans advise saving for retirement, after 25 years, maybe land in a colony, maybe citizenship if you didn't have it before. But you can't help noticing how many limping, scarred men still carry spears past their supposed discharge age. Promotions help, become an optio, maybe a centurion, and the pay doubles. But the cost? More bruises, more responsibility, more vine staff wax. Letters circulate. Some men squint at tablets from home, lips moving as comrades read aloud for them. Mainstream fact again, literacy rates in the legions were higher than average, partly because orders had to be read and records kept. Historians still argue whether this made soldiers unusual intellectuals or just slightly less illiterate than farmers. Either way, written words mattered here. As the evening cools, you sit with comrades, stretching sore legs, trading jokes about who snored loudest last night. One soldier pulls out a crude flute, another sings a bawdy tune about a Gaulish innkeeper. For a moment, laughter covers bruises. Joke 2, honestly, the song's so bad the enemy should surrender just to make it stop. Then rumors ripple, whispers of a donativum, an imperial bonus when a new emperor takes power. Veterans tell stories of chests of coins spilling into camps, feasts paid for by the emperor's desperate need for loyalty. Quirky tidbit, sometimes soldiers even auctioned off the throne, backing the highest bidder. Rome's politics bled straight into your mess kit. You chew your last crust of bread, staring at the few coins in your hand. They feel heavy with sweat and short on promise. You realize the legion isn't just about fighting, it's about waiting. Waiting for pay, waiting for land, waiting for discharge. Joke 3 drifts out with a sigh, if Rome really wanted loyalty, they'd pay us in sandals instead of silver. And as night falls, you tuck the coins away, wondering if you'll live long enough to spend them anywhere but here. The next dawn doesn't begin with drills or ditches, it begins with incense. The air smells of smoke and sacrifice, and soldiers shuffle toward the standards planted at the camp's heart. Today is about oaths and omens, because Rome never fought with steel alone, it fought with ritual stitched into every heartbeat. The legion's eagle standard gleams in the sun, silver wings catching the light. Men bow their heads as if staring at a god. Mainstream fact, the Aquila, the eagle standard, was sacred, lose it in battle, and the entire legion was disgraced. Historians still argue whether men truly fought harder for the eagle than for survival, but the stories of desperate rescue suggest it wasn't just symbolism. A priest raises his hands, chanting over a goat tethered nearby. The animal bleats, the blade flashes. Blood spatters the altar stone, and the priest studies the steaming entrails. If the liver looks healthy, Mars approves. If not, the march may be delayed. Quirky tidbit, Romans took haruspicy, divination by entrails, seriously enough that entire campaigns hinged on whether a goat's liver had blemishes. You shuffle uncomfortably, stomach churning from both hunger and superstition. The augur steps forward next, eyes fixed on the sky. He watches the flight of birds, nodding sagely. If they will to the right, good fortune. To the left, trouble. Joke 1 slips out in a whisper, so basically, our entire survival depends on whether pigeons feel like cooperating. After the omens, you swear again by the standards, repeating the sacramentum already etched into your bones. The centurion reminds everyone that gods, emperor, and eagle all see your every move. You grip your shield tighter, unsure whether you're more afraid of divine wrath or another whack from the vine staff. Later, in the mess, soldiers whisper stories about curses muttered in dark corners, charms tied to sword hilts, prayers scribbled on wax tablets. Mainstream fact again, religion and superstition bled into every part of military life. Historians still argue whether Roman soldiers believed wholeheartedly in these rituals or went through the motions for morale. You suspect it's both. When death waits daily, any comfort is welcome. A veteran shows you his amulet, a tiny bronze phallus, meant to ward off evil. He grins at your raised eyebrow. Quirky tidbit, such charms, called fascina, were common, sometimes worn as pendants or carved into shields. Protection through humor, in a way only Romans could manage. Joke 2, nothing says battle ready like being guarded by bronze anatomy. The eagle-bearer passes by, tall and solemn, the standard glinting above him. Men step aside with reverence, even officers. You realize that for Rome, symbols weigh as much as swords. Lose your helmet, and you're clumsy. Lose your shield, and you're a coward. Lose the eagle, and you're nothing. That night, under the stars, a hush falls as the camp astrologer mutters predictions. Mars is in ascension, Venus in decline. Some men nod, others roll their eyes, but everyone listens. Joke 3, as you scratch another mosquito bite, if Venus can fix blisters, then maybe I'll start believing. As you crawl into your tent, you think about gods, omens, and the eagle's stern gleam. Rome doesn't just conquer with steel and sweat, it conquers with faith, drilled as deep as discipline. And whether the gods truly guide you or not, you know tomorrow you'll march as if they do. The camp stirs with quieter voices today. The veterans sit apart, their armor dented, their eyes carrying years of campaigns. You join them, listening as they speak of discharge, the dream you cling to during marches, drills, and endless bowls of barley mush. Mainstream fact, a legionary's term of service was about 25 years, sometimes longer if the emperor demanded. At the end came land grants, citizenship for auxiliaries, or a pension in coin. Historians still argue whether most men lived to see these rewards or whether they were more myth than reality. The scars on the men around you suggest the odds aren't generous. One gray-haired soldier tells you of comrades who retired to farms in Gaul, growing vines on land won by their own swords. Another mutters about veterans who ended up begging outside the very cities they once conquered. Rome gave, but Rome also forgot. Quirky tidbit, some emperors settled entire veteran colonies in frontier regions, creating towns that still bear the imprint of Roman street grids today. You glance at your own bruised arms and wonder if you'll limp into old age with land under your feet, or if you'll end in a ditch far from home. Joke 1, muttered to yourself, at this rate, I'll retire with nothing but calluses and lice. The veterans speak of campaigns, sieges in Dacia, mud in Britannia, deserts in Syria. Their eyes grow distant, voices lower. Some stories swell with pride, others with regret. You sense that service doesn't end when the stipendium stops, it lingers in memory, carved into every scar. Mainstream fact again, emperors relied on veterans for political power. Settled colonies spread Roman culture, and disgruntled veterans sometimes joined rebellions. Historians still argue whether loyalty to Rome lasted after discharge or if bitterness often soured it. The truth probably depends on whether promises were kept. As evening falls, the centurion gathers the cohort one last time. He speaks not of drills or punishments, but of legacy. Rome endures, he says, tapping his staff. And you endure with it. You look at the eagle glinting in the fading light and feel both pride and exhaustion tangled together. Back at your tent, you lie awake, listening to the snores of comrades. You think of the oath, the iron kit, the endless drills, the blisters, the barley porridge, the lice, the omens, the sieges. You realize the legion isn't about a single day, it's about years stacked like stones, each one heavy, each one shaping the empire. Joke 2 drifts through your foggy mind, if the gods really favor us. Maybe retirement comes with better food. The night deepens. Stars burn cold above the camp. You close your eyes, knowing tomorrow the trumpet will shriek again, and you'll shoulder the weight of empire for another day. Joke 3, whispered into the dark, at this point, Mars owes me overtime. Now let the noise of camp fade into the background. Imagine the trumpets falling silent, the fires burning low, the murmurs of soldiers softening into steady breaths. The hard ground beneath you no longer feels like punishment, it feels like an anchor, holding you steady as the night wraps around the world. Breathe in slowly, as though you can still smell the faint tang of olive oil and wood smoke. Breathe out even slower, as if you're letting go of the weight of the sputum, the endless marches, the ache of drills. Each exhale lightens you a little more, as though you're setting down the sarcina you've carried all day. The eagle's standard glints faintly in your memory, not as a burden, but as a quiet symbol of belonging. The gods, the omens, the rituals, they fade into the hush of stars. What remains is the rhythm of footsteps you've marched, the camaraderie of men beside you, the silent comfort of routine. Picture the camp as it looks from above, a perfect rectangle carved into the earth, glowing faintly with embers. Beyond the walls stretch forests, rivers, and fields, but inside is order, safety, rest. Tonight, you don't have to dig, or march, or lift a shield. Tonight, you only have to breathe, let your body feel heavy, as though your armor has melted away. Your limbs soften, your mind loosens, your chest rises and falls with the calm certainty of a legion at peace. The battles, the sieges, the punishments, they belong to tomorrow. Right now, the only command is to rest. The stars overhead keep watch like silent sentinels, patient and eternal. You are safe, anchored, and still. Sleep claims you gently, as though you are part of Rome's rhythm, steady and unbroken.